Remake Rewind.
Thank you for listening to Remake Rewind, the podcast where we decide if remakes or reboots should have happened. I'm Mike, and I've got a special guest today. Who is this? Who am I talking to?
This is Kat.
Yeah, so, like we said in our last episode, Double D and Alex are at the busiest time of their lives, at least work-wise. So they're taking about a month off, and then they're going to be back. And we've got two great co-hosts that are going to be filling in while they're gone. So Katrina, who you guys should all hopefully know. And then we're going to have Nick Gambino from Get to the Podcast will be here on our next episode. So that's great. And this is also the first podcast where we're shifting our day of the week from Wednesday to Friday.
I think it makes sense.
Yep.
Pretty
we want
sure
you guys...
I told you to do Friday in the first place.
We want you guys to think Friday, MDXpods Day. Every week. Anyway. We're going to be talking about some award-winning movies. Or one of them's award-winning, and then this one of them is going to be award-winning pretty soon.
It's going to be award-winning. Everything's just a popularity contest.
So what are we going to be talking about, Katrina?
A Star is Born.
A Star is Born. So we weren't originally planning on doing this right away, but Katrina and I were lucky enough to go see in a screening that had a Q&A.
Speaking
right?
of award shows, we saw that screening because...
So yeah, Katrina was lucky enough because she's part of SAG, that we got to go to a screening. That was followed by a Q&A that had Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, and
Sam fucking Elliott.
Sam motherfucking Elliott. So because we saw that, we're like, oh, well, we might as well do an episode on it.
Might as well.
And we're going to cover all four, and then we got incredibly busy. We're like, well, we'll just watch one other one.
Yeah.
So we're covering the 1976 version of the movie as well as the 2018 version. The 1976 version covered, who was in it again? Barbra Streisand. Babs. And Chris Christopherson.
Have you seen the original before this?
I have not seen any of them. So this was the 2018 one is the fourth version of this movie.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Yeah. 4 of them.
I didn't realize until we went to that Q&A where they were talking about that. They're like, you gotta have guts to remake a movie for the 4th time.
Right. I thought it was the 3rd one. I didn't realize there was a 4th version, so that's pretty crazy. I think we should just get into it, because neither of us have seen these before, right? You hadn't seen any of these?
No, I hadn't.
All right, so let's just get into it. Do you want to read the synopsis for the first one?
I will synopsisize, as you call it. Talented rock star John Norman Howard has seen his career begin to decline. Too many years of concerts and managers and life on the road have made him cynical, and the monotony has taken its toll. Then he meets the innocent, pure, and very talented singer Esther Hoffman. As one of his songs in the movie says, "I'm gonna take you, girl, and I'm gonna show you how." And he does. He shows Esther the way to stardom while forsaking his own career. As they fall in love, her success only makes his decline even more apparent. That's an interesting
true enough.
Summary of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty accurate.
How would you summarize this film in your own words?
If I were to summarize
10
this
seconds.
Briefly, in 10 seconds, I would say basically a kind of a has-been, drunk, alcoholic rock star just runs into a talented singer and helps her get famous while kind of having his life go to shit.
Yeah.
So I've never seen this before, and when I got started, when they said his name, they announced his name at the beginning of the movie, I immediately laughed because he has 3 first names as his name, John Norman Howard.
A lot of guys do.
Right, but I mean, a lot of times you see this joke or hear this joke in a lot of movies, like, what's going on? Ricky Bobby, he's got 2 first names, but 3 first names? That's too many.
I don't think so.
That's 1 too many.
That just makes him more of a rock star. No, I think
the
first name
have 1 name.
Right, the first name as a last name thing is really more of a country vibe.
Right. The thing about this one, it was weird right off, kind of the bat. It kind of opens up with this like stadium, full or arena, whatever it is. This venue is packed and people are screaming and they're saying that this guy's 2.5 hours late. And I thought it was a really weird venue because you see like all the seats facing one direction, but then randomly there were seats facing like perpendicular to all the other seats. It was a really weird setup in this venue.
It's for acoustics, Michael.
I
you
guess.
wouldn't understand.
But I get that acoustics are important, but like having people literally 90-degree facing each other, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it is kind of weird.
And then, all these people are getting upset, and then he finally shows up, immediately does some coke. Like, the first thing we see him do after getting out of a limo is doing some coke.
It's his routine,
obviously. It's his routine, yep. They had it ready to go. Gary Busey was his business manager.
Dude, he was always scary looking.
Right. And then he goes up and he starts singing, and he was awful. He was so bad. He was like Kesha sing-talking.
Kinda.
Like, it just wasn't good. And then he puts on, like, he was like 2.5 hours late, like I said, and so he sings like one song, and then his second song he kind of forgets the lyrics, and like the audience starts like yelling at him. He's like, "Fuck you guys," like yelling at the audience, and then he walks off stage. I'm like, oh, he's walking off, but then he comes back with like a zombie mask on.
Yeah, that was weird.
And then all his band had like, there was a Daffy Duck mask and a Mickey mask and just all these weird masks, and then I didn't understand what was going on.
It's some experimental 70s shit.
Right. And then meanwhile his manager's in the back, Gary Busey, like counting money, and he's like, "Hey, there's not enough money here," and like the guy's like, half the crowd left and the other half asked for money back, and I'm thinking that crowd was packed still.
Right.
But that was a little strange. And then he finally goes and sees he gets drunk or whatever, he needs to go to a bar and get more booze, so he goes to this bar where Barbra Streisand is singing like lead vocals, and there's like she's got like 2 backing singers, and the place is kind of packed, and he's there kind of watching. And I was kind of, like, underwhelmed by her singing initially.
Here's the thing. I don't think the reason that he was drawn to her in that situation necessarily had to do with her singing.
What do you mean?
I think it was more her sex appeal and the way she handled herself in this situation. Because she's doing this number. She's got her 2 backup singers. You can tell that this is, like, their Friday gig. Like, this is their regular gig. They work their number all week, and then they get up there on Friday night and they do their thing. And this jerk walks in. He's already making a scene. He's falling down the stairs on his way in. He's already drunk.
Trying to take photos of him.
He's already drunk. He's already this massive distraction. He takes a table, like, front and center.
Yeah, kicks somebody out of it.
And then he's, like, arguing with the waitress because he's drunk. He's being belligerent.
Well, he kept saying that... Well, the thing that was weird is he kept saying he wanted to listen, and she kept talking and hassling him. And like, you're right, she was handling it. She would, like, kind of stop. But my point is, like...
I'm not even done.
Okay, sorry.
So he's making this big scene, and some of it is him, some of it is the people who are interacting with him. And she, like, gets right up in his face and is like, "You're blowing my number."
Right.
She gives him the attitude and lets him know, like, "I don't care who the hell you are. You're on my turf. This is my number. You need to shut up and stop being a distraction." Right. And then everyone else kind of gets in the way. Like, he sees that. You can see that he's already impressed with her at that point. He's like, "Okay, you've got my attention." He's gonna watch, and then everything goes to hell. He ends up in a fight with this dude who's, like, trying to get him to sing a song for his lady. And he has to be whisked out the back door by Esther.
Right.
Barbra Streisand. So they end up in this situation. They're running out the back door. He's like, "Get in, I'll give you a ride home." She's like, "I don't even know you, I don't care, but there's a mob coming."
Right.
So I think that's where it kind of kicks off. Like, she's so unimpressed by him. And his whole life, everyone is blowing smoke up his ass. Everyone's, like, worshipping the ground that he walks on, not holding him accountable for anything. So she's giving him this attitude, which he doesn't get from anyone else. And she's giving him this pushback that he doesn't get from anyone else.
Attitude from everybody else. Like, everybody was heckling him at the concert because he was drunk. He forgot the words. People are giving him less money because he was late. People are walking all over him.
Like, in his personal life. Like, everyone who's around him, who's close to him at this point, is still kissing his ass.
I guess so.
Giving him everything he wants. Enabling him. They're all enablers.
Right,
that's the thing.
But still,
and that's, like, a really important key in this because he's an alcoholic.
Right. And that I can give you. I get that that's something that would be impressive to him. But to me, it's still more important that the whole point of this is it's called A Star is Born.
Right, I'm not finished.
Well, I wasn't finished.
Well, you talk through, like, half of every episode, so...
Well, my point was... No, it's totally fine. My point is just, it should have been... I wasn't wowed, and I think you should be wowed the first number.
No. That's not the whole appeal of her. That's the thing. So he is already intrigued by her, and he's like, I want to spend the night, She's like, no, I'll make you breakfast.
Yeah,
like,
I like that whole scene. He says she has a great ass.
Right.
Which she did.
Dude, she was hot.
What was crazy was before any of this happened, she was like doing her little dance and she spins around. I'm like, Barbra Streisand kind of has a nice ass. And then
she was hot.
He comments on it. He also says, you got a pretty mouth.
Yeah, you got a pretty mouth. So he's already intrigued. She's not super impressed by him because he's clearly an alcoholic. He's clearly out of control of himself. He's clearly trouble.
Right.
Like, she knows right off the bat he's trouble. I don't want anything to do with this guy. Like, I'm busy. I've got other things to handle. Like, my life is bad enough.
But she invites him back in the morning.
Because she doesn't think that he's going to show up. So she invites him back in the morning, says, I'll make you, beef and biscuits.
Something like that,
He calls her bluff, has his chauffeur go and get a pizza.
At 7 in the morning.
Yeah, at 7 in the morning.
Get a pizza at 7 in the morning.
Wakes him up like, yo, it's time for your breakfast date. So he brings this pizza in. And then they just, kind of start getting to know each other. And then he sees some of the music that she's written. And this is, her good stuff. This is where she really shines. Because the stuff that she's doing in the nightclub, she only sings her own stuff. But that's what she thinks is going to please the crowd.
Right.
That's not what she's written for herself. And she's got this music lying around. He's like, I want to hear it. Play it for me. And she doesn't want to. She's really hesitant. And then finally she plays it. And that's when he's, really wowed by her talent. And when that part of it shines through. And that's the first time that she really sparkles in this film. Because when she's performing, yeah, she's having fun or whatever in the nightclub. But it's not until, they do this close-up of her playing her acoustic guitar and, humming. She's not even singing lyrics yet.
Right.
Because she hasn't written the lyrics for this number. And it's gorgeous. I can, just from that scene, I can understand why this film is iconic.
I understand to an extent, but I still think, I think what's weird is we obviously, going into this movie, know Barbra Streisand is iconic and a legend and everything, right? So
she's never really been my cup of tea, personally.
Me neither, but, obviously, The Wind Beneath Your Wings is, her most famous thing, right? That's the thing everyone knows her. And then, of course, Yentl and, some of her big, Broadway kind of stuff.
Right.
But still, she is considered a legendary singer.
Because she is a legendary singer.
And I just expected something bigger from the first number. I agree with everything you said, but I still think the catalyst should be, holy shit, she's an amazing singer, plus she's got all this stuff. I
don't think that's the catalyst, though. I think the catalyst was her vulnerability.
And I think maybe a little bit of background. I think maybe normally I like to watch the original movie, then the new one.
Right.
But in this case, we watched the 2018 version first. And while a lot of the beats are the same, a lot of the major elements are the same, it is like that in the newer one where he just, sees her and he's just like, holy shit, Lady Gaga's incredible kind of thing. And maybe that's just what I was expecting.
Well, and I think they were less likely to take that risk with anyone in film, which, was not, it wasn't a medium that had necessarily been mastered for creating this whole package yet.
Right.
In the 70s, you might have something that looked great. Your master was still going to have specs on it.
Right.
The film was still going to have issues.
Gritty.
The coloring was going to have issues. And the sound was atrocious.
But this movie, actually, the production values were incredible.
It was far and away better than pretty much any other film from this era. That said, you're not going to take the risk of trying to ensure that you create this moment where it all comes together in the 70s on film. When you're running that risk with the audio, things just don't translate the way they do. Whereas now we have incredible technology.
Right.
We can pull out this flawless sound mixing, and then to have a powerhouse like Lady Gaga,
right?
That you can make it happen.
Exactly.
And I think that's why this is all just speculation, but I think that could be a major difference between the two.
Like I said, I'm looking at it from a 2018 lens,
right?
So it's recently watching that one.
No, but I think that was. I think they were trying to convey that, though, that the catalyst of what made him really commit and, really pursue this woman was this moment of vulnerability.
Right.
And you see how talented she is, that she can take something that's not even finished and just make it completely captivating.
Right. And I like that. I really do like that scene in her kitchen and in her house while she's singing. I just still think it would have made a better movie if he was just like, holy shit, and then he sees that and he's just like, this is the total package, versus because it kind of comes off a little creepier than if he was like impressed with her that way.
No, I just
he was kind of rapey. Like he kept trying to get in.
Oh yeah, he was way too aggressive.
And so that's where I was kind of like, it would have made, to me, I would have felt more, I don't want to say comfortable because his behavior was unacceptable. To me, I still think it would have been a better move for her to just to be like, holy shit, like everyone's coming out to see her and she's amazing, but she's just, nobody else really knows her other than her little local bar. But I do agree with what you're saying 100%.
And I think that also developed the character. Like, up until that point in the movie, you only had half of a character.
Right.
You had this girl who's, like, trying to make it in this impossible field.
Oh, we don't know anything about her until they're actually at her house.
If you're performing in a nightclub, you're on a mission.
Right.
And you're probably failing.
And we find out she's recently divorced.
Yeah, so you find out, you get this, like, she's got her guard up the night before. He's being way too aggressive. She's kind of like, play by my rules, and we'll see what happens. So he takes it, he's going to play by her rules and see what happens. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to give you this glimpse of vulnerability. I'm going to give you this little piece of myself. I'm going to have a conversation with you. You can have breakfast with me. And then he convinces her to play her song. And I think once she does that first, like, really genuine number as herself, not as whatever her, like, nightclub persona is, as herself,
right,
that's when the character's really fleshed out.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense to me. So getting back into, like, the movie, he ends up inviting her to go to, like, some concert he's going to be performing at, and she agrees to go, and they take a helicopter there. He immediately is just kind of like an asshole. During his performance, he gets on a motorcycle and starts just, like, doing donuts on the stage.
Some other guys, like, he storms off stage.
Right.
Some guy's back there. He's like, nice. He makes a comment about the bike. He's like, you like it? It's yours. Like, people just kissing his ass everywhere he goes. So he grabs this dude's motorcycle, drives it around behind the stage for a few seconds, nearly runs over a bunch of people, drives it onto the stage, does a whole bunch of, like, burnouts, he's knocking over equipment, and then he, like, rides it into the pit.
But what I thought was funny about that is you see him, like, drive off, but he, like, jumps. Obviously, it's a stuntman. It's not Chris Christopherson, because the guy who's flying through the air has much darker hair and it's a little straighter. But he literally, like, jumps off the motorcycle. You see the motorcycle fly off screen, and then you just hear an announcement.
They call that bailing out.
Yeah. You see, you hear a guy on, like, an announcer going, like, he's okay. Days. But you hear announcers like, he's okay, guys. He's totally fine. Don't worry about it. Like, word for word, that's almost verbatim what they say. The
announcer was really loud in this.
Yeah. Don't forget, he's totally fine. Everybody, back up. Oh, here's a stretcher. Good.
Get out of the way for the stretchers.
Right. And everything. And then everybody's like, panicking to get him to, an ambulance.
They have all those, like, choppy, shaky camera movements. Yeah. You don't actually really see anybody clearly.
And then all of a sudden, all you see, and this made me laugh so hard, is it, like, cuts to just, like, a crowd outside of the little, like, venue, and you just hear some, like, random family like, that's, like, the third time this happened. And I'm like, what? And then
she's ditched.
Yeah, they forget about her.
There.
There's, like, a little bit of a time jump. We don't know how much time goes, but he's drunk at his swimming pool, and, like, his business manager and his accountants are all like, bro,
you're getting sued by everyone.
You're getting sued by everybody. At this point, every time we do a show, the manager takes 25%, which is a pretty large cut. But the manager's taking 25%, and then they're like, and then you got to do this to the venue, and then you owe this much for your lawsuit, and you owe this much to the government. The government's, like, garnishing your payments. So you're basically not getting paid at all.
Right.
And then a radio DJ shows up at a helicopter and starts heckling him. So he pulls out a gun and shoots at this helicopter.
I mean, that whole situation was over the top. One, how does a DJ get the money for a helicopter?
Like a radio station DJ.
Right,
like,
yeah. How does a DJ...
Maybe he took the traffic one?
Does he have, like, some pull with the traffic department in the station? I mean, that's expensive.
Well, the thing is, this DJ followed them across the whole movie.
Are expensive.
Right, totally.
The whole situation was ridiculous. So he, like, finds this guy's house. He's, like, violating,
FFA. Is it FFA?
That's Future Farmers of America. the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. He's probably violating some FAA rules.
Oh, for sure he is.
Buzzing this neighborhood. Like, all these guys on the ground are just, like, gesturing wildly.
And they were actually filming that.
And he comes out with a freaking gun. And, like, okay, if there's a helicopter fairly close to being overhead, I'm not gonna shoot at it.
And it's a dangerous shot, just having the helicopter there in real life, because they didn't have CG, so they actually had a helicopter there.
What happens if you hit who you think you want to hit, or like if you hit the fuel tank or
the rotors or
anything? The tiniest thing could go wrong, and you're dead.
Your whole house is gone. Your entire posse's, your entourage is dead.
I mean, maybe that's what he was going for.
Maybe. So, an unknown amount of time passes. This happens. So he gets a whole case of whiskey to go try to apologize to the DJ, and the DJ's basically on air is you're drunk and you're an asshole. This guy's trying to apologize. And then it just happens to be that Esther is doing a jingle or something for the radio station there. And so they kind of reconnect, and she's like, bro, you forgot about me.
Yeah.
You're a dick kind of thing. And, he breaks her down and talks her into, going out with him again. And
because he's a master abuser.
Right. And they have this really weird love scene. It was really fucking weird.
But the first one?
Yeah, the first one. So they're kind of just kissing, but it's really weird, open mouth. Just kind of nibbling on each other,
rubbing their mouths together.
Yeah, and then there's a weird bubble bath where he's got a bunch of beer.
I think that might have been a 60s and 70s film kiss kind of thing, because Marlon Brando did that a lot, and I don't.
A lot of them did that weird kind of just rubbing their mouths together. I don't want
anyone ever to kiss me that way.
But then they had what was supposed to be a sexy bubble bath, but it was the same kind of thing going on in the bubble bath, but there's just a bunch of beer cans around the bubble bath.
Yeah.
And then, there's a bunch of random stuff of them talking and going to other performances. And so my next note is over an hour before they're at a concert where he pulls her on stage, where, she gets discovered. This movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it was an hour and 1 minute when she actually got on stage to sing. So, and then she just, takes off. She's famous instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie kind of slows down a little bit. You see her recording and her album, and it is what it is. It's fine. But then she begs him to get married, and he's in a moment of clarity, he's just I'm no good. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drunk. No, this is a really bad idea. And she's just look, I was divorced before. I don't think I would ever want to get married again, and I want to marry you, so you're going to do it. So she's, very strong, and she kind of manipulates him, and I'm kind of oh, okay, she's, flipping the tables a little bit, and, taking control.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go and get, land somewhere out in the boonies, and...
No, he's got land. He's got a ranch, but...
Well, I thought he said he bought it for them, because he said it was between...
Yeah, he did. He bought this land, and he had all these intentions of building his house there, and then it just sat, and then he had all these lawsuits, so he's got 3 mortgages on the property, and that's why he said, between all of that, I figure we own about, what...
20% of it or something like that.
An eighth of an acre or something outright.
So, they end up, what's weird, so they decide to go there, and as they're, talking about what they're going to do with the land, they're driving around in this Jeep, and they're talking about, douching and, flavored douches.
Well, they got married at the Justice of the Peace.
Right.
And I guess the city gave them, a gift box. A gift box to go with your wedding.
And it had flavored douches, a strawberry douche.
Douching was big in the 70s.
Yeah, totally. But still, flavored ones? Why do you need flavored?
I don't know. That sounds terrible for your vagina.
I don't know.
You should never put anything flavored in your vagina.
Right.
Never.
There's sugars and stuff you can get. Yeah, it's bad.
It's bad news.
So the movie slows down to a crawl at this point.
Oh my gosh.
I got really bored for the next 30 minutes.
They spent a solid hour just
it was 30, 40 minutes at their house, just
canoodling.
Yeah. And there's a point where he's driving around the motorcycle doing donuts in the mud, and then he crashes on purpose. And then she's freaking out, and then he just winks at her. I mean,
it illustrates the passion and the abusive nature of the relationship, but they could have condensed it down to 25% of what they had.
Right, I agree. She goes to the Grammys.
The Grammys were itty bitty.
Yeah, tiny.
Itty bitty.
And she was best female artist.
You could have held the Grammys in a Holiday Inn Express.
Right, totally. So he gets drunk, and like, so she's giving her thank you speech, and she's like,
and he's late,
and he shows up, he's like tucking in his shirt, like while he's walking up, and he's like, you don't need to be thankful, you did it on your own, this is all bullshit, kind of thing, like just shitting on the Grammys.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone starts like yelling at him. She's like, leave him alone, leave Britney alone.
The camera crews kind of corner them.
Yeah, and so they have to like do a dash out, just like at the beginning of the movie at the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a mess.
It's a mess, and like then the movie just like speeds up really quick.
Yeah,
and everything. So they're back at the place, and she wants to go on tour, and she wants him to be like the co-headliner and like sing with her. And he's like, no, it's a really bad idea. And then the manager comes like, this is a really bad idea. And so he's going to tell her like, hey, I'm not going to sing with you, but he needs to go pick up Gary Busey from the airport. And you just see him driving like a jackass on the, he's drinking beer and driving, and he's driving like his little Corvette. And then it just cuts to like an ambulance sound, and like he just crashed and died off screen.
Yeah.
Like it's a little weird. And then like she mopes for a little bit, and she's like, you lied to me. You said you're going to be there. You're going to tour for me. And
she does a monologue on her own,
yeah,
just sitting there.
And then there's like a 10-minute like musical number where it starts out slow, and then it kind of comes to like a disco rock.
That closing musical number, it's a little like a show tune at first.
Yeah.
Starts out kind of sweet. Then it gets weirdly sexual.
Yep.
I mean...
well, it was supposed to be one of his songs.
No, I can understand, like, you missed someone, you had a passionate thing together, but you don't really talk about banging after someone's dead. Like, you don't mix the dead with sex. Like...
what about Twilight?
Ever. Oh, God. That is straight up necrophilia. Yep. But then, you get to the end of the number, and it's, like, weird, like, upbeat, jazzy show tune.
Right. That's basically the movie, in a nutshell. I mean, and not really in a nutshell. We went into some pretty great detail. But this movie had a weird production. All the clothing that she wore was her clothing. Like, came from her closet. And in the credits, it actually says, like, costuming Barbra Streisand's closet.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
She had a few things that I'm fairly certain that Barbara Butcher made her. Barbara from Tickle Die Fantasy at the Renaissance Fair.
Right, I would believe it.
Fairly certain.
Some weird things about this movie, though, was like the director hated Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson. Like, hated them. So he
they were probably attached to the film before he was.
Yes. So Barbara was.
So why did he end up directing?
I don't know. So apparently the reason this movie was a little long and had some like scenes was that, kind of slowed down the movie, but they were really important to Barbra Streisand. Apparently, and this is only in like biographies of different people, said that she actually directed a bunch of scenes that she felt were necessary for the character development that the director didn't think were relevant, so she just like went and did it herself.
Whoa. And
some of the other things, she really wanted Elvis. And like she actually went and like flew to Elvis and like was like, come on and do this.
She went to Graceland?
Yeah, I guess.
Holy cow.
But at this point, like Elvis hadn't been in a movie in like 8 years,
and
so they didn't know if he was a draw.
400 pounds.
Maybe. But then also the studio's like, well, we don't know. We don't want to take a risk on Elvis anymore. And so they went through.
He would have been so good though at his peak.
Right.
But so, I don't think his acting style would have translated well.
Right. So then they also wanted to give it to a bunch of different, like, all the major actors in that time. They wanted to do it, but they basically said no. So then they ended up getting Chris Christopherson, and apparently the director hated him. And so he... I
didn't like him that much either.
Not in the role, but Chris Christopherson ended up, like, I guess apparently was drunk. He's like, yeah, I didn't care because I was drunk the whole time.
You can tell.
Right. And then apparently he didn't get along with Barbra Streisand at all. And, like, he... in like an interview, or he wrote like an article himself, and then in another interview said that she was the worst, that she was like a bitch and all this, like,
oh my God.
Like a week before the movie came out, was just saying how terrible it was and how he hated working with them, and they never worked together. Like, none of them ever worked together again. Like, it's crazy. Like, it had a pretty fucked up background. Just fucking weird background. Like, everybody hated each other, but this movie was iconic.
And then everyone was super unprofessional.
And so apparently the director didn't like Chris Christopherson because the director was a World War II veteran, and he looked down on Christopherson for being in the army but not actually serving in Vietnam.
Wow.
Kind of thing. So it's like, he enlisted, he just wasn't deployed in Vietnam. That's not his fault.
Yeah, that just sounds like an excuse.
There was some bad blood on this movie.
Projecting much. No,
Right.
so it's interesting because towards the end of the film, they have this big fight. You think she's finally gonna leave him and get her life together, and then instead they ride off into the sunset, and it's the fairy tale romance all of a sudden.
Right.
Which is bizarre because nothing about this is a fairy tale romance. It's
Not at
just
all.
like abusive garbage.
Right, and like I've got some stuff to say, but I think I want to like talk about the other one and compare it to that because he is a dickhead and he's very manipulative and he's an asshole. But like when you compare it to the 2018 one, I actually think he's not as bad, but he is bad. All right, so I think it's time to talk about. That was really cute.
Oh, it's really cute.
You bastard.
Hi, baby.
Hey, Hagrid. You need to be quiet, though. Okay, so I think it's time that we talk about the 2018 version, and I guess I will synopsisize this one. This one's written by Warner Brothers. I don't want to read that one, so I'm just going to read the anonymous one. And it just says, a musician helps a younger singer find fame, even as age alcoholism sends his own career into a downward spiral. Simple, short, to the point. So this one, we gotta, like I said at the beginning of the episode, we gotta go do a whole Q&A segment afterwards.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool. I think we'll spend a decent amount of time talking about that after we go over the movie. Just like kind of first impressions, what did you think about this movie?
I thought it was beautiful. We never talked about what we liked about the last movie.
Yeah, we could do that real quick. I thought it was boring overall. I think I texted you that I thought it was boring, but you liked it. But I thought Barbra Streisand was great. I think she gave an amazing performance. Yeah. What was weird is she's much, much older than we are. And I've only ever seen her as like a mom or something like that and like meet the parents, meet the Fockers kind of thing. So seeing her as kind of like the poster of this movie was very sensual. The poster of the movie, like she's just like in this embrace with Chris Christopherson. And then seeing her, the partial, like kind of the side boob, the tasteful side boob. And then that like seeing her as like kind of like a sexual being was actually kind of like, it kind of made me question myself a little bit. And it's because she's not what you would say conventionally pretty or conventionally beautiful.
I think she's beautiful.
But I thought so too in this, but she's not what you would say conventionally pretty because
I've always thought she was pretty.
She's obviously ethnic.
She's striking. She's
but,
not even ethnic. She's Jewish.
Jewish, but that's what they say ethnic when you describe their features. But yeah, that's something that I thought was interesting, and I thought the chemistry they had was fantastic.
Yeah, they had incredible chemistry, and that's something. I mean, as much as they overdid the scenes where they're building their relationship, I think they kept them in because they're all good scenes.
Right.
They're great scenes because they really showcase this incredible chemistry that they have and this ease that they had with one another, and they look really natural. It seems like you're really peeking in.
I would believe that they were a couple in real life.
Right. It seems like you're peeking in on these little slice of life vignettes that they do.
Right.
Which I did really like, and it was unusual for films of the time, and I think a lot of the dialogue was very natural, especially for that era. And I really appreciated that. I also really liked some of like the one-liners that
there was some good cheeky dialogue.
She threw in there. I like this one part where he's trying to, I guess like basically produce a song for her, but
right.
they're still hashing things out and trying to get the mood of it. And he has her play the intro to it and begin singing, and he's like, "No, do it again." He makes her do it several times, so she finally gets it, and it's really good. And he says, "Yeah, that's it. Put some righteous anger in it." And so she sings the first part of the song, and then she stops and she's like, "I also wash out your hairbrush." Like, this random,
right.
like, it's so funny that you can really see all the subtext working behind her and behind all of her lines. And I thought it was funny that She, like, just, said her subtext out loud after singing it.
I also really like the scene where he's, like, considering cutting off his beard, and he's, like, got scissors. He's about to do it. They're literally, like, wrestling while he has scissors in his hands.
Yeah.
But overall, I just say the chemistry. Like, I honestly... Her career, I don't feel like was a big point of this movie. Like, when I see Star is Born and obviously seen the 2018 one first, I just expected it to be more about their career and not their personal lives, and this was more personal life, so it just wasn't really what I expected. It's not a bad movie, it's not what I expected, and I thought it would kind of dragged. It was a little boring, but overall it was, for the 70s, it was beautifully shot, and
yeah, it was a beautiful film.
I do think the chemistry was fantastic.
Yeah.
Alright, so back to 2018, jumping over. Speaking of chemistry, I think one of the biggest things for me was I don't necessarily think Lady Gaga was the best actor in this movie. There were scenes where she was great, and there were other scenes where I didn't think she was great.
Mm-hmm.
If you thought the chemistry between Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson was great, I think it paled in comparison to the chemistry that Bradley Cooper and she had. Like, it was electric. The way they looked at each other, little smiles they had, like, I was, like, enamored with it. Like, I kind of was, like, loving their relationship at the beginning. I was laughing with them. I was giggling with them. Like, there was just something to it that felt real.
Giggling with them.
I was. I
love
thought,
when you giggle.
I thought they were delightful. At the first, like, half hour of the movie when they're getting to know each other, and I don't know what it was. There was just this look of admiration that Bradley Cooper had, and I don't know what it was. Like, in that moment, I could see him falling in love with her, and I was kind of falling in love with her too. And it was just because of that chemistry. Because I don't think Lady Gaga was a good actress for a lot of the movie, but in those scenes with Bradley Cooper, I was just like, "This is real."
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that I really liked in terms of the chemistry.
Well, and I think part of the way they shot it really lent itself to that. And
yeah,
I could tell as we were watching it, I think even before the Q&A, I could tell that they had shot it differently. And I really got the sense that they felt safe, because when you see actors who feel really safe in a working environment, that's how you get those performances.
Right. Where they can be vulnerable, and
there's absolutely no other way to really get those performances that strongly, and it even translated in a lot of the camera work. There were a lot of things where it's not just that it was a close-up, it's that you got the sense that they were doing the shot handheld and they were punched in really close, but they also had the specific type of lens that you have to be
right
closer to them for. It wasn't really your standard Hollywood setup.
Right.
It was much more intimate the way they did it.
Beautifully shot. Like, the cinematography in this movie was incredible. There was one shot towards the big difference between this movie and the Barbra Streisand one. This one spent a lot more time on their careers. There was a lot of personal life stuff, but there was a lot more career aspects. And he brought her on stage in, like, the first half hour of the movie.
Right.
But when he brings her on stage for that first time and they're singing together, once again, I just was in love with the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this one shot, and you know me, I don't really cry in movies. I don't really tear up in movies. It's very, very rare that it happens. But there was that scene where he's on stage. He brings her on stage for the first time in front of, like, his sold out crowd, and they're expecting him to sing, and then he brings her on, and she's like fighting, and, like, she starts singing. It's a little slow, not super confident, but it starts building up, and she starts coming alive, and then he comes in and joins, and there's this one shot where you just kind of see them, and then you see the audience, but then you see that, like, the sun's coming down, and you see this really, like, this, like, purple sky, and these trees, and it was just a really beautiful shot. And then looking at like I said, the emotion that they had, and you seeing that they're falling in love with each other. Like, I actually teared up in that scene where she's singing with him for the first time in front of a sold out crowd. I just thought it was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it was really stunning, and I did like that catalyst. I didn't necessarily believe that being the catalyst that launches her career.
Well,
I can
I
see
agree.
I can see it being buzz, and I can see how a viral video gives you a boost for, like, 2 weeks. But
the difference.
In real life, that's
Right.
what a viral
Right.
video does. You get 2 weeks out of it. And then, like, maybe it could have given her some opportunities, but in this film, she was, like, a superstar from that.
Kind of. The difference is, like, this one still had some vague kind of, like, how much time actually took place.
Right.
Because she, before the producer came and talked, there was, like, a little montage of her traveling with him, and she was singing with him multiple times. So it wasn't just, like, a one-off. Like, it was multiple times that she was singing with people. So she kind of developed a relationship with his crowd. And it wasn't until she had that one British, like, producer come, and she was starting to sing some country, kind of like the country rock. They kept saying he was a country singer, which I felt like it was more like Stained or like Seether. I didn't feel like it was country music, because there's some real, like, he shredded, like, the guitar. It was a little country, but I feel it was a little bit more rock than country. I guess it's country rock. But the producer is like, no, you need to get out of that. You need to go more pop. And then she kind of, like, changed her style and then blew up. And she also was on Saturday Night Live, like, immediately.
Yeah.
This movie, I think, was a more accurate representation of the title A Star Is Born, because it really shows her launch into being a full-fledged star. So I think this deserved the title a little bit more. So what are some other highlights for you on this movie?
I think what really sets this film apart from just even other films this year, not necessarily comparing it to the original, was the performances. It just, you could tell it was so raw. And they even, they talked about this in the Q&A, like Lady Gaga was saying, that the way they approached this film, they made everything so real that in her mind, this was not a film set. These memories that she has of making this film and these scenes that they acted out, these were real things that happened.
Right.
And, like, some actors really do approach their work that way. A lot of method actors do. I don't personally, because I think that's how you end up emotionally screwing yourself up, and you end up re-traumatizing yourself.
You hear a lot of actors going to therapy after roles now, which...
Yeah. I think it has its merits. I think there are other ways to get there that are less harmful for you. But I think a lot of actors kind of do go through a phase where they experiment with diving into things like this and making it real. And, when you're acting out a scene, if you have a really good team with you, then yeah, that is real in the moment, because the best thing you can hope to do is just be honest.
Right.
And if you can be honest and it makes it real for you, then you're really lucky. But I think that's also a really good way to end up really screwing yourself up.
Like Toni Collette, Heath Ledger,
really, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a prime example right there of why that kind of approach can be really detrimental. But at the same time, every single one of those performances are legendary.
Right.
Those
I
are
agree.
all
They're
iconic
incredible
performances, because it just really translates differently on the screen. You can see it, you can feel it, and you can tell, like, even just watching them in the Q&A, like, sitting with each other, those three actors, you can tell that they have a deep relationship now, and they have an intimate friendship.
I agree.
And it's from that trust and what they had to go through building this film. But, like I said, there are other ways to do that. And I don't know, like, from Bradley Cooper's, where he's coming from, he directed this, and he acted in it.
And this was his directorial debut as well.
That's a lot. That's a lot to do, especially with some of these scenes. Like, they were talking about in the Q&A, there's a scene where she is in the bathtub. And a big theme early on in the film is that she's constantly being told that
she's not pretty.
She's not pretty.
Yeah.
She's not pretty, whatever. And he, from the beginning of the relationship, is constantly telling her how beautiful she is and she's perfect. And let me see that nose that people don't like. And
pull a line from the original movie.
I just wanted to get another look at you, which is a line from the first film, but it's also a big theme of the closing number.
Right.
Getting a look at you.
Yep.
I just want another look at you. Which I really like. I liked that homage. I thought that was sweet. But there's this scene about halfway through the film where he is spiraling and his alcoholism is really taking a toll on her, because he's an abusive piece of shit, basically. And that's what alcoholism does to people.
It came out of nowhere, because this was the first scene where he's like really bad.
Yeah.
Like,
so he goes in, he confronts her when she's in the bathtub.
And she's drunk, too.
She's a little bit drunk, and she's just kind of like, okay, what do you have for me? And he tells her that she's just ugly.
Yeah, like, so she's, like, talking about her career and everything. He's just like, I don't like the music you're doing. It's not your music. She's like, it is my music now. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm proud of it. And he's just like, because this is kind of where, like, the shift comes. Because initially he's kind of like, when she gets that producer, you can see that he's like, I don't really like this, but I don't want to get in her way. So he doesn't say anything.
Right.
But at this point, he's just like, I know better than you. Like, you should listen to me.
But he's also feeling threatened,
yeah,
you know,
he is.
because he's been the star and now she's eclipsing him. And he peaked.
Right.
There's nowhere to go but down, especially because he doesn't want to take care of his shit.
Right, because he's also got like tinnitus, and so he can't really perform very well because he can't hear what he's doing.
Yeah, he's
and he
got
refuses to use monitors.
He's got like hearing loss, like degenerative hearing loss. So he's dealing with all this stuff. Plus, he's an alcoholic and
a drug user.
And that scene, you know, he was directing that. And so she had to be vulnerable with him as her director. And also it's just a vulnerable position for any actor to be in, to be in a bathtub.
She's naked too.
And then on top of it, you know, he's trying to switch between these two roles of being antagonistic and mean and terrible.
Right.
As the character, and then being supportive as the director, which that was amazing that he could pull that off.
I think you hit it on the head earlier when you said honest. It was a word that they used. God, like I was almost getting annoyed with the word. They said honest.
No, it's so important. I mean, like,
it is.
That is the main. I mean, for me personally, when I approach anything, if it's not honest, it's not.
You're right. Like an honest performance you really truly believe is the best performance. I think,
and that's what we're looking for as an audience,
right?
Like nobody watches. I mean, like there are some movies that are so bad that you like watching them,
right?
You always start out when you've heard that a film is good. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the honesty. You're looking for those moments that are honest because that's what's real. The
only thing that kind of annoyed me, so we went to this Q&A, and the Q&A was about an hour or so, and they only answered one question from the audience.
Pretty much.
It was only one, because like the person who was hosting it was pretty weird, but they were very, they were kind of redundant. They kept repeating themselves over and over, and I probably heard the word honest 1,000 times in that hour.
Yeah.
But, you were right earlier when you said that you can tell that they have a really close relationship. I definitely felt that way with Sam Elliott and Gaga. Bradley Cooper didn't talk as much as the other two did, but you definitely can see that they felt comfortable with each other as they were talking. They were constantly kind of like touching each other. There was a familiarity there that made sense. Speaking of that bathtub scene, that was actually one of the scenes that I thought Bradley Cooper was amazing in that scene.
I thought she was incredible.
I didn't think she was good in that scene. Like I think the problem that I had with her performance overall, I'd say like 90% of her performance I thought was amazing. Mm-hmm. There were only like, kind of like a few parts that I didn't think she did well. Like the parts kind of towards the beginning when she wasn't being confident with herself, when she's like, "Is this real?" Like after she's kind of started developing her relationship with him, but before she was famous, like she was just like, "Is this real? This isn't real. You got to be kidding," kind of thing. And it just. I didn't believe that part. Like, that still kind of came across, like, hokey and corny to me. And, honestly, that bathtub scene, like, there was just something, like, when she... I think it was just one line. There was one line in it that she did when he called her ugly, and then she kind of, like, snapped. Her first line, it kind of seemed hokey to me, and it kind of took me out of that scene. But I'd say other than, like, that scene in the beginning...
So nitpicky.
Right, but the thing is, like, that was a scene that they talked... about and pretty in depth in the Q&A, and I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit in that Q&A because I honestly didn't think that scene. I thought the scene was incredibly powerful, but I don't think that was her best scene. I thought she was a lot better in the rest of the movie. I think she was great 90% of the movie. I think it was just a couple of scenes where I was like, eh. But overall, I thought she was incredible. Like I did not expect the performance that we got from her from that because the only other acting she did was like a season of American Horror Story. So I was impressed with her overall. It's funny that scene is the one that people are talking about, and that to me I felt was one of her weaker scenes, and it's still a very great, powerful scene because that is the shift in the movie. I think that's the point in the movie where it drastically shifts in tone.
Right.
Because you could almost say the first 45 minutes to an hour of the movie is almost like a romantic comedy. because they're cracking a ton of jokes. It's really sweet and endearing, and it feels like a love story. And then at that scene, it gets dark. You have a similar scene to the Grammys. You have him going to rehab. You have him lashing out at family members. You have him breaking shit. And then, like, the movie ends on a super depressing note. Like, even more depressing than the other film that we watched.
Right.
And so, like, there's a huge shift at that point. And I was just like, I was uncomfortable for the rest of the movie at that point.
And so did I just not pick up on this initially, or was it really not revealed in the first maybe third of the movie that Sam Elliott's character is his brother?
I didn't get that until he punched him in the face. And it was probably in like 30-minute mark.
Okay, so I think that was a reveal.
I think they mentioned it, but like they mentioned his name,
like
but I missed his name. He's his manager.
He's like not necessarily his manager, like his road manager.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to be like his road manager, and you can see that he's kind of trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, but
right.
also kind of recognizing that he is who he is, and there's only so much you can do.
Right. And that's a big theme of the movie as well. Like at the end of the movie.
Well, he's an alcoholic. What can you do?
Right. And obviously spoilers for this movie. We didn't say spoilers at the beginning of this thing because the movie's still out in theaters and everything. Should we just reveal the end right now so we don't have to dance around it?
I mean, it's a fourth remake.
It's the fourth remake. Well, it's different because the last movie, the guy dies in a car accident. Like, he didn't kill himself.
I
in
think
this movie,
he did.
I don't think he did.
I think he did. I think he went out there to die.
Well, no, he went to go pick up... I don't think he did. I think he was being reckless.
I think he went out there to die. I think he killed himself.
Because that's not... Crashing a car is not a good way to kill you, because you can't guarantee you're going to die.
Yeah, but not everyone thinks that clearly when they're going out to kill themselves.
That's true. I just felt like in that one he had a little bit less. In this movie, he ends up hanging himself, and at the end of the movie...
You know, in the first one, he goes through all the motions. He's kind of like wrapping up his loose ends.
But in this one, he does the same thing.
But
he feeds the dog a steak.
He only does it for like, you know, a 20-minute, not 20-minute like playtime, but you see him like going through these motions. He probably spends like 20 minutes wrapping up his loose ends. He goes out in his car, and I'm pretty sure he does it on purpose.
I don't think he did, because he was like having, it seemed like in that moment he was having a good moment with his wife, and he was going to go pick up his best friend.
I think he recognized that she was going to be with him no matter what, and that he was the worst possible thing for her, and this was the only way that she was going to have a good life.
I guess like the way you can look at it, if you do think he killed himself, is that because he was picking somebody up, somebody would know to go look for him, and the route he was going to take, somebody would find him pretty quickly, because the friend would like be waiting at the airport for a long time. You're like, where the hell is he? And then he would call the house, and they would send, you know, like a search out. But I didn't feel like...
So he kills himself in the new one.
Yeah. I thought it was just a tragic accident. But in this one, yeah, in the newer one, he does kill himself. And that kind of came, for me, it was a little bit of a shock. Like, it was and it wasn't, because he went to rehab.
No, I don't want to say I like it because it's tragic, but it's like that's real life.
It was more powerful and effective.
It is, because that's how it happens. It's like you can work so hard to help your loved ones through their battles and this stuff, and honestly, it blindsides you.
And that's what Sam Elliott said.
When you think that they're doing well, when you haven't heard any bad news from them for 2 months, and your last conversation the week before was great, and you had a really nice conversation, and then something happens.
Right.
And they illustrated that so beautifully in this new movie, where he and his brother have like one last conversation in the truck, and you know, it's like the usual like manly conversation, like they have been in silence, and it's all subtext.
I don't even think that was subtext on that. I thought that was real on the surface, because he straight out says...
No. I mean, like, the weight and the power of the conversation is in the subtext, because they kept it very, very concise. There were very few words spoken, and it was all just...
You're right. Their sentences were short, but
him saying as little as possible to convey as much as possible.
But he was pretty explicit in the fact that... So one of the big conflicts in the movie between Sam Elliott and Bradley Cooper is that Sam Elliott is like 20 plus years older than him. Like it was a weird thing that their parents ended up having another kid. They wasn't expected. And so Sam Elliott basically raised Bradley Cooper, but Bradley Cooper idolized his father. Or at least you think he idolized his father. At the end of the movie, it's revealed he goes, I never idolized him. I idolized you. And then you just see the scene.
Nah, you can't include. I can't spoil that moment.
Oh, well,
just cut out that line.
Nah, I'm not gonna. I said
Mike,
spoilers. I already said spoilers.
No,
If they're listening to this,
you're ruining it.
it's fine. I already said
You're
spoilers. It's fine.
ruining
But anyway, like that scene was. That was another shot that made me tear up a little bit. Sam Elliott backing out of that driveway.
Right.
Like that was an incredible 3 seconds where I was just like, ooh, and that moment was when I was like, ooh, something's gonna happen, kind of thing. And I haven't seen any other ones, so I guess the guy dies in all the versions of the movie.
Yeah.
But I didn't know for sure.
I mean, I haven't seen the other ones.
But what kind of shook me, what I liked about it was every person kind of felt like they were responsible. So Lady Gaga's character, Allie, thought she was responsible because she lied to him because she wanted him to go and travel with him or with her. And the managers were like, no. So she's like, well, then I'm going to cancel the tour because I need to be with him because he just got out of rehab. So she lies to him and says, oh, they're canceling the last leg of the tour because they want me to get into the studio right now to record a second album.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, maybe he knows I lied to him and he doesn't trust me and that's why he did it. And then Sam Elliott's kind of like, no, like this was always going to happen kind of thing. But then as an audience member, I was like, oh, it was her manager. Because her manager comes and was like, you're ruining her life. Like, you are the reason why she's not touring kind of thing. And then he breaks down and it was like the next scene you see him like feeding his dog and he's like, I'm going to meet you at your performance. And then he kills himself.
No, and I think that honestly, that's why I think, maybe if I had seen the original before I saw this, that would not be my takeaway. But I think my takeaway is in both versions, he realizes that he's always said it, that he's no good. He is. Yeah. He's a garbage human being. He's an abusive, and some of it I'm sure is alcoholism, but some of it, he's
got a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, and that ego is just always going to be an issue, and she is never going to be happy with his problems.
She'll never be able to be her own person.
Yeah, and I think, you can love someone so deeply and it's just never going to work.
Right. And the other thing that I thought was impressive about this movie is it goes so much further than the other version did. Like, the Grammy scene is way gnarlier.
Yeah.
But it's also, even though it was much more over the top, I felt it was believable. Like, I didn't feel like I
didn't think this film was as believable.
Why do you think that? Because of the meteoric rise, or
the meteoric rise, the Grammy scene. I think all of it was a little bit more over the top.
I think so.
Which
a lot
is
of people
interesting because I felt like it's hard to say. I felt like the beats were less believable and the major plot points were less believable.
I agree, but I
felt
disagree.
like the dialogue was what sold it.
Right, and the performances, of course.
Yeah.
So I agree and disagree. So a lot of other reviewers have said, oh, the rise was too meteoric and everything. But I think that's, once again, is the point of the movie, is that it's supposed to be this meteoric rise. Like, if you look at
the ease with which she makes these decisions about her career.
But there wasn't, ease. Like, she struggled. Like, she got yelled at from her manager for axing the backup dancers. No,
but I mean, as soon as he gets out of therapy, she is willing to drop everything to be by his side. And those are not easy decisions to make.
I don't think it was easy, though, because she clearly had difficulties with it. And I think
she had difficulties after she told people this is the way it's going to be. But initially, that was her knee-jerk reaction, was to be there for him.
But I think the difference between this one and the other one is that, I'm going to preface this a little bit with something from the Q&A and then get back to it. So in the Q&A, this question was kind of teed up. We
have a Q&A. It's like our own Silmarillion.
Right. So what's funny is Lady Gaga got made fun of a lot because apparently, for dozens and dozens of press things,
there can be 100 people in the room and 99 don't believe in you. But if one person believes in you,
So they were
and
trying
that
to give her...
person is Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, they were trying to give her something other than that to do. So this person gave her a softball question, and they're like, oh, we've been told that you think that this character isn't anything like you, kind of thing. And she's like, oh, yeah. And so Lady Gaga goes on this little... I'm going to very briefly summarize. Basically, she's like, oh, yeah, this character, Allie's nothing like me. I don't see any of myself in her. And I kind of was like, bullshit. Now, granted, the big difference between Lady Gaga and Allie is that Lady Gaga came from a very, 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 very wealthy family.
And with boatloads of self-confidence in her abilities.
In her abilities.
Not necessarily in herself.
Right.
But that she was going to be a star and she was going to make it. She's always been sure.
But she said that nothing... But she, in countless interviews, has said that she was told that she's not going to make it. She's not pretty enough to do it.
Every woman in entertainment gets told that.
I agree. And Lady Gaga, she's gorgeous, but she isn't what you would say conventionally pretty. Like, she has some interesting features, but she makes up for it in charisma and just presence, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of felt it's like, don't shy away from it. It's okay to be relatable to your character. But anyway, so getting back to the movies, one of the big plot points is she's told, and you kind of brought it up earlier as well, is that she's told that she's not pretty. She can never make it. Even her own father's kind of like, you can have all the talent, but you're not going to be able to make it because of the way you look. Like, her own father kind of implies that kind of thing. And her own father has a chip on his shoulder because he was told that he's a better singer than Frank Sinatra, which honestly a lot of people were, but Frank Sinatra just had that swagger. He had the charisma. So I think what makes kind of this whole movie believable is the fact that there's never a point in this movie where she's super confident in herself. Like, she didn't want to get up on the stage. She initially declined the invite to that first concert, and Jackson, played by Bradley Cooper, had his limo driver follow her around until she agreed to go. Yeah. And so the only reason that she's where she is because of him, so she feels like she owes it to him to give up what she's doing to help him, and that's where I felt like that was actually believable. I honestly thought I can get behind the decision. I don't think it's the right decision, but I can get behind the decision from her point of view. Kind of thing. So I felt that whole thing, giving up the concert and it being that easy, was the right thing, because she, even at that point, she didn't even believe that she should be where she's at. Right. Because she has her own emotional baggage. So I bought that completely. And honestly, that meteoric rise, like, I think that's, look at Justin Bieber. He had a couple YouTube videos and then he blew the fuck up. That's Usher. Right? Well, but exactly, it's the same thing. Justin Bieber is the male Star is Born, except Usher's still alive.
Oh my god. So who does that make Haley Baldwin?
Haley Baldwin is...
Didn't he date...
They're married now.
What?
They're married now.
Is she Alec Baldwin's offspring?
Niece. I think she's Stephen Baldwin's daughter, or Billy Baldwin.
I know nothing about anything.
But she is a Baldwin.
Anyway, about Justin Bieber. One thing that I did really like about this, that was in that more believable arena, was that
I see what you did there, arena.
They developed the secondary characters quite a bit more, and they developed the leads' relationships with them a lot more.
I agree.
And they didn't necessarily spend a lot of time. They just did it really effectively.
I agree. The pacing in this movie was incredible.
Yeah, so she had her best friend who was kind of along for the ride for the entire film. They spent a lot of time on his relationship with his brother. They spent a little bit more time on the dynamics of, her relationship with her producer and him trying to really, honestly, do right by her. Right. And that was often to the detriment of her romantic relationship. Right, absolutely. Which, it's the right thing to do to help her out, but it created that really difficult conflict for her. So I really liked how they used the secondary characters, and that's something that I think was very much lacking in the first film. The secondary characters were more caricatures.
Right, like Gary Busey was barely in it, and he didn't really contribute much to the story.
And they were good performances, but I think they just didn't give them a lot to chew on.
I agree, 100%. I do think the Andrew Dice Clay as her father, I think he did a lot, and he didn't have a ton of time. I think I can't think of the guy's name right now, but he's in Heroes and he's in all the J.J. Abrams movies.
They fleshed out the characters they fleshed out the world and the backstory. Because the first movie, her personal life and her family life is really just a void.
Yeah, they just mentioned that she's divorced. Like, we don't know really anything about her background.
Yeah, she's got this New York accent, but she's living in LA, and that's never really explained.
No, it's not. One of the other things that I really liked about it, and talking about background, is so he has his little, like, the movie starts with a little concert that he's at, and then he is trying to get drunk, but he doesn't have enough booze. Like, he has like one swig of whiskey in the limo, so he decides to stop and go to a bar, and it happens to be a drag bar where she's performing.
I loved that first
that scene is great. Like, when he walks in and everyone's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I just here for liquor," and he's like, he's cracking jokes with everyone. He's being super charismatic, and
she's magnetic in that.
Oh, she's fantastic.
It's great because it's not the character. She's playing a part in that, and
exactly.
That's where you get that first glimpse of her showmanship.
The showmanship, her voice is incredible. And because I saw this movie first and seeing that, and you see once again the look that he has, and he's just like, oh my god, wow. And he's just like, she does this all the time. Like, he's fascinated with her, and I thought that's a huge hook. Like, I immediately I can see why this guy wants to discover her and get to know her and make her famous, because she has what it takes, and she's like lighting up this whole room where
But that's what they had to do for a shy character.
Right.
Because this character is much, much less self-assured.
I agree with you. And, we talked about that in the first movie. I totally agree that they're different characters, but I still think that first scene, that first time you hear them sing, should be this powerhouse performance. And
right.
And I just think that I had an emotional connection to that scene a lot more than the other one.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I felt like Barbra Streisand, I just couldn't stop watching her in the first
She was
film.
very good.
She was absolutely captivating.
No, I agree.
Entire film.
And that's not what I expected.
It's really interesting how Lady Gaga has this ability to... she did a fantastic job. It was a great performance because she embodied her character so fully that in those moments where she wants to portray this showmanship, she is captivating. And then there are other moments where she's so vulnerable and she's very interesting to watch, but it's not the same quality.
It's not.
I
agree.
It's not Streisand.
I agree. So this movie, they just announced as of the day that we're recording the Golden Globe nominations, and she got nominated for Best Actress. Bradley Cooper got nominated for Best Actor, Best Director, and this movie also got nominated for Best Picture. And then Best Original Song, right? Lots of great nominations. So
the music was really
the music was incredible. Even so, the thing that was really impressive about the music,
and it's not my style. None of it was my style, but it was great.
So Bradley Cooper learned how to play guitar with Willie Nelson's son for a year in his garage. He was actually playing the guitar for not all the stuff where he's shredding, but he was actually playing the guitar for a lot of the movie.
Yeah, you could tell.
He originally wasn't planning on doing voice lessons, but he realized singing is very hard. So he went and got vocal lessons and a dialect coach to kind of give him that extra little flair. They did a great job with it. And I the guitar, the opening riff to that first musical number.
Yeah.
Is so fucking good.
Yeah.
I really liked the music in this movie. 100%. Like I said, I didn't feel like it was country because I hate country, but I really reacted to the music in this. So
right, yeah, I had mixed feelings about it going into it because I hate country, and I had never seen the first film, and I wasn't sure with those two things combined how much this would hold my attention. I really didn't have that much interest in seeing this film.
Yeah, well, me neither. And then the other thing,
watching it blew me away.
And the other thing that I thought maybe in the first 10 minutes I wasn't going to like it because I heard Bradley Cooper speak when he was in the limo, hey, I need more alcohol. And he's also talking to his limo driver hey, how old's your son again? Thinking he's a little kid, and the kid's 17 years old. And so it's shows that Bradley Cooper doesn't give a shit about anybody, right?
Yeah.
But the way he was talking, he kind of had this marble mush mouth that Jeff Bridges does in all of his westerns, in True Grit and everything. So I was like, oh, is he just trying to do a Jeff Bridges impression kind of thing?
Did he confuse Chris Christopherson and Jeff Bridges? Damn it!
So I initially was kind of like, oh, I don't know if this is good. But it wasn't quite Jeff Bridges, but it was very much like that.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, ooh, I don't know.
Well, and he had to do some vocal technique to get more resonance and a deeper register because, he's supposed to be Sam Elliott's brother, and Sam Elliott's voice is iconic, so
Right.
he's not going to change his voice.
No.
But it's a big theme in this where that character is a musician, he's a singer, and, he says, "You stole my voice."
Yeah, that was incredibly powerful.
So, they really had to, they had to sell that vocally, and they did an incredible job.
I think they did an incredible job with that. And the other thing is, he's supposed to be an alcoholic and drug user, and been singing for you. That fucks up your vocal cords.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, it's the whole thing that they did with this music. So Lady Gaga wore no makeup other than lip gloss and
She's so
chapstick
beautiful.
For this movie. So to make, kind of ugly her up, she didn't wear makeup. Bradley Cooper did spray tans every day for this, and they also sprayed menthol in his eyes to give him the bloodshot look, so he can play a drug addict, alcoholic kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So they went through a lot of shit for this. Yeah,
he looked gross.
Yeah, he looked gnarly. His skin looked all like cracked and worn. He looked kind of leathery.
That's just from doing close-ups in HD.
You're right, but he even in person, when we saw him at the Q&A, he looks like he's aged 10 years. Making this movie, he looks way older. He looks
considerably older, but you've never seen him in person before.
That's true.
So,
I haven't.
Stars always look a little bit better with extra lighting.
Right? The Photoshop.
When you're on camera, you've got at least 10 lights pointed at you, and you've gone through hair and makeup. And even if they're
some celebrities look good in person,
like
I don't know her name, but the girl who's in what's the Archie TV show called?
Oh my god, you keep telling me about her. I get it. She's hot.
But yeah, the redhead in that movie, that show, she looks better in person.
Cheryl.
Yeah, her.
I don't know
Cheryl Blossom.
Name.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, some celebrities look good in person. Anyway. God, this movie, I loved this movie. I really did. I didn't go into it expecting to enjoy this as much as I did.
I didn't expect to either, and within the first,
10 minutes I was in.
First 2 minutes, I was hooked.
Once he was in that bar cracking jokes and everything, like I said earlier, the first 40 minutes of this movie is almost like a romantic comedy. Mm-hmm. And there are faults in this movie. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I forgive almost all of them.
I think it's a little bit overhyped, but it is still incredible.
I think
overall, I'd say... I thought the original is still a good movie. I think it's
the third one.
Oh, was that the third one? I thought that was the original.
No, the original one was from 1937.
Oh, holy
Then
crap.
There was one in the 50s with Judy Garland.
Okay, yeah, so I don't give a shit about those. As far as the Streisand one, it still holds up. It's still a great film. Yeah. It's a product of its time. It's hard for us to look at this,
objectively.
It's hard to look at some guy who looks like he went out and lived in the mountains for 6 years and came back with that hair and that beard and still be like, oh yeah, that's sexy. It's a little bit more difficult to imagine these things now. But Streisand was freaking incredible in it, and right. I think she's the reason that film still holds up as well as it does. And the new one is incredible, but they're totally different.
They are
movies.
Drastically different. The thing I do agree that this might be a little overhyped, but I don't think it's overhyped to the level that La La Land was overhyped.
One thing they both do, though, is, as much as they try and paint it as a cautionary tale, they do glamorize the abusive relationship.
They do. I agree. And I think this one, she didn't really push back on him at all. Even when he pisses himself at her at the Grammys, she never gets angry with him other than when he called her ugly in the bathtub.
Because the female characters are such good people.
Right.
But
Barbra Streisand pushed back quite a bit.
It paints this picture that good people don't give up on
you. They
you.
accept you for all your faults.
Good people accept your faults. They try and help you. They help you be a better person. And the fact of the matter is, with an abuser or anyone who's struggling with any kind of addiction, they might never be better people.
Right.
And nothing that you do is going to change that.
I agree. And it was funny because this movie, because of the performance, because the honesty, as much as I hated how much they said it, I honestly, every time that Bradley Cooper started to get better, I believed it. So there's a point where he stops drinking, stops doing drugs on his own, and he's doing really great. And then what ends up happening is he's supposed to be performing at the Grammys, and then they decide to make it like a tribute, and they take away his performance and make him part of an ensemble tribute. Mm-hmm. And he's doing fine with it, but then at the day of the Grammys, he just decides to take pills again. And I was like, no, Bradley! And then he goes to rehab, and I think he's better, and then he just, for whatever reason, like that manager comes and says what he says, and it kind of makes a spiral, and then you think he's just going to go drive off in his truck, and then he hangs himself, and I was just like, I thought he was better each time. I wanted to believe he was better each time, and I think we kind of went through the ringer with that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's safe to say that do you think the remake was necessary?
I'm of the camp where I think no remake is necessary because there are so many new scripts out there and so many writers looking for opportunities that we don't need to keep rehashing the same old shit. But I love the movie.
Right. I'm in the same boat. I think it did enough different to justify it, but I mean, they could have called it anything. They didn't have to call it A Star Is Born. They could have just called it anything else.
But if they had,
they would have drawn comparisons.
People would have just been like, so this was A Star Is Born.
Yeah, I guess. But I liked it quite a bit. All right. So, Katrina.
What?
Thank you for filling in.
You're welcome.
I love and appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I love and appreciate you too.
Oh, gosh. Tell our listeners of Remake Rewind where they can find you if they're interested in hearing more stuff from you.
I'm all over the internet at Katrinaosity. Check out my YouTube channel. If you don't know how to spell that, look for toothbrush bracelets.
It's her biggest thing. But yeah, she's great. She does a lot of DIY stuff. DIY.
I mean, I have interesting videos. I've got some pretty freaky storytime videos.
Pretty crazy vlogs and whatnot.
Gonna hear about the time I attacked Mike in my sleep.
I still got the scars.
I mean, you don't have to watch the toothbrush bracelet video, but that's an easy way to find me.
Right. Check out our other podcast from My Childhood. If you like Katrina, she's great. Next week, the next episode's going to be great. We're going to be doing a 3-parter, or 3 movies. We're going to be doing 7 Samurai, and then the 2 versions of Magnificent 7 with Nick Gambino from Get to the Podcast. And just check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Bye.